Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television. We, at the call-in session, took opinions about what people think about this protest and how it can be different from our previous experiences. We are doubling down on that conversation in this discussion forum, this segment. We are at that crossroad again, where we are about to experience what appears to be a very massive national protest. We had a similar one in the NSAS protest in 2020, which served as a stark reminder of the power of collective action.
Of course.
Since the 2012 protest, where even the current president came out to march on the street in demand of the reversal of some government policies that were deemed to be anti-people, anti-development. But again, we saw how the 2020 protests panned out with the way the government responded to the issues. We saw government vehicles deploying thugs to break the people's resilience. Those things were caught in cameras. We are not making them up. And a lot of Nigerians came to the conclusion that it does appear that the government is the one who is against some of these protests. And there has also been concern currently about the single government narrative of these protests being hijacked, of how they have uncovered plans to carry out this hijack. And people are worried about how you are able to uncover plans and you are unable, to uncover the faces behind those plans. All of these dynamics. And we're going to explore all of these dynamics in our conversation. We are also going to look at what lessons we learned, from the 2020 experience and how we can deploy that, to ensure that this constitutionally guaranteed process are given the protection it deserves, so that whatever messaging is there, can be aired to the government. Whatever people want to ventilate, they can, using these legitimately provided opportunities, and then we can move on and redefine the way these protests are organized this time and going forward. And to do justice, to this topic, we have joining us via Zoom from Gombe State, Mr. David Akoji, who is the Director of Special Duties at the National Orientation Agency. Good morning, Mr. David.
Good morning. I'm actually speaking from Bauchi State.
Oh, nice. Which is the next door neighbor to Gombe. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. We also have joining Mr. David from Yenagoa, the Bayelsa State capital. We have Collins Boleigha, who is a public affairs analyst and a former chairman of the Nigerian Barr Association, Yenagoa Branch. I hope I got your name correctly, Mr. Collins. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you all. Save for the pronunciation of the Boleigha. It's Boleigha, not Boleigha. The G is usually silent. Thank you.
So it was safe for me to have sought that explanation, and I hope I am forgiven.
Of course.
Thank you very much. We begin with Mr. David, who is currently in Bauchi. We have heard all kinds of narrative from the government about their fear of this protest being hijacked, about uncovering plans by some persons, to cause mayhem during this protest. And people are beginning to wonder, is that the only narrative in town? Why is the government not talking to us about what it can do on its part to ensure that people get the opportunity to ventilate, which is a constitutionally provided right, as far as our country is concerned?
Well, you see, government is speaking the way it is speaking and expressing its worry about the possibility of violent outcomes, as a result of this proposed protest, because of the intelligence available at the disposal of government. Let me just say this. If you look at our context today, government and our security agencies are grappling with several dimensions of security challenges in various parts of this country, even without this protest coming on. There's the challenge of banditry in the Northwest, of farmer header crisis, of kidnappings, of armed robberies, and all of that. So these are existential challenges that government is already grappling with. Now, if protest happens in procession in various streets across the country, I have heard some people say that it is the job of the security agencies and the police to provide protection, and to ensure that this doesn't get out of hand and become violent. But we must be realistic about this. We do not have sufficient security. Can you hear me?
Of course, please go ahead.
Perfectly.
We do not have sufficient security operatives to cover every inch of Nigeria. This reality must not be glossed over. Yes, we have security. Yes, it is their job to protect lives and property, but we do not have sufficient to cover every inch of this country. So given the background of the existential security challenges that we're already grappling with, it is not out of place to say that we are worried that this thing may not go exactly as the legitimate organizers of this protest, are planning. There is the possibility that it may, spill out of control, and then undesired outcomes may be seen, and which will not augur well for innocent, law-abiding citizens. So this is the worry, actually.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Akoji, for your submissions. But Barrister Boleigha, let me come to you quickly. So on Tuesday, a couple of legal practitioners, including Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, and also Mr. Adeboruwa, were with the Inspector General of Police in a meeting. And of course, they laid their concerns pertaining, to issues and questions that might arise, as well as the tendencies of this protest becoming, violent at some point. However, it seems like the government has pushed out a narrative of one that might look like the protest might be hijacked. But is this enough, to, make the people stop, or to prevent Nigerians from coming out to exercise their rights of freedom of assembly?
No, I do not agree. See, it's a very simple thing. The mere fact that you are even complaining or saying that there will be insecurity is even a failure on the part of the government. And that is even a reason to protest, because one of the primary duties of government is to ensure that we have security, to provision of security, safeguard life and property. That is the primary responsibility of government. And if government says, no, there will be insecurity, we cannot, and it will get out of hand, that is a monumental indictment on the government, on the part of government. And that is even a reason why people should even protest, because you cannot provide security for us, because it's a social contract. The mere fact that we've allowed you to lead us and to take care of us presupposes that your duty is to ensure that your citizens are safe. So that is just on one side. Secondly, let us look at the narrative. The DSS came out with information that they know the sponsors of these protests and those who are going to cause violence. So why don't you pick them up? Why are you just talking about nameless persons who will hijack? So why don't you pick them and allow the people who want to protest peacefully to go about it? Secondly, the Inspector General of Police is calling on people who want to protest in Abuja to submit their names, venue, and things like that. Clearly, they are working at cross purpose. One arm of the security says they know those who are going to foment trouble. Another is calling on those who are going to protest. So all these are just, as far as I'm concerned, scare tactics to discourage and dissuade protesters. Okay. Now, for the record, I am yet to hear or see in which of the protests, either EndSARS or that one that took place under President Jonathan, yes, that any of the protesters became violent. The only time violence arose was when the security forces either fired shots or tear gas, and sometimes even recruited personnel. We saw them, right, like you alluded to it
for a moment. Talking about EndSARS, would you agree that the repercussions or the outcomes of what we saw during EndSARS and the fact that a lot of the demands that were made remain unanswered and unsolved to date is one of the reasons that is triggering the hunger and end bad governance protests as we see today?
Of course. You see, one of the things that every administration should be thankful for. I want to believe that Nigerians are quite resilient and, very accommodating. All Nigerians want are just basic necessities: food, security. That's all. And when you begin to fail in this barest minimum and you begin to apportion blames and begin to ascribe one thing or another, see, protest is a fundamental right. Section 39 of the Constitution gives every citizen the right to express himself. Yes, so you can't do that, and you cannot stop people from expressing their grievances, either by way of protest, letter, or whatever manner. Two, you cannot even stop under Section 40, stop peaceful assembly of people who want to assemble together to discuss or oppose a particular decision. Yes, I agree, under Section 45, these freedoms are not absolute. There's nowhere for public order and public safety and what have you. And that is why it is incumbent on the government to say, look, why guaranteeing this provision? We're going to provide security for those who want to protest, to ensure that hoodlums do not hijack this. Because the protesters are not the hoodlums who hijack some of these protests. And until you begin to address these issues, the basic issues that encourages this protest, then you've not even done anything. To come out with such palliative, you asked a question, in fact, before we came on this program, talking about whether there was rice distribution and whether anybody has seen. I've not seen here in Yenagoa, but those are just quick fix measures. Even if they were done, that will not achieve anything. What Nigerians are interested in is the long-term effect to ensure that, one, there is security, to avoid some of the situations that arose during NSAS where people were killed, shot at indiscriminately, until government begin to think outside the box and realize that their primary duty, I keep emphasizing this, to the citizens is protection of life and property and welfare's program.
All right, Barrister, may I come back to Mr. Akoji? You listened to the barrister, and I also hear some of your opening remarks around legitimate government concerns because of the inadequate security manpower, considering that a number of places are flashpoints in this country. As a matter of fact, we understand that the Nigerian Army is deployed in 32 out of the 36 states of the Federation. But if you have followed conversation at the national level, especially from the civil society and GIDP, it does appear that there is no going back on this protest. And so I would like to hear from you, as somebody who speaks from the side of government, that isn't there anything else this government can do, especially in we all know the dangers of not allowing the citizens to ventilate. All of us, whether you're on the side of government or on the other side of the divide, have endured very severe economic headwinds. You know, people are unable to feed, people can't travel. We have most offices where people come in and sleep in the office for 5 days before going home on Friday because of this hardship. Don't you think the government, in its current approach, it's going to deny itself the opportunity to harvest the genuine thoughts of Nigerians by wanting to shut down this protest under some of the excuses that have been advanced?
Well, the fact that must not be glossed over is that there are two things that have been consistent in the narratives coming from government. One of those is an acknowledgement of the fact that indeed we are going through very difficult times as a nation, and that indeed the cost of living is high, and many people are going through challenges. You know, this is the first component of the narrative that's been consistent, you know, from government. The second narrative is that, yes, citizens have a right to protest, as encapsulated in Section 39, as elucidated by my colleague on this panel, the barrister speaking from Yenagoa. The concerns that have been expressed about our context of pervasive security challenges and of the fact that widespread nationwide protests at this time may provide an enabling environment for the perpetrators of all these security challenges to escalate their nefarious activities, you know, is real. Now, to presume that the acknowledgement of that fact, you know, is tantamount to government saying it's negligent in its responsibility to protect lives and property is it doesn't take into account the sacrifices that our security men are making daily in confronting those who are bringing these security challenges to us. Only recently, you recall, a number of policemen and a POS operator were murdered in the southeast, in cold blood, in the fight against bandits and all of that. On a daily basis, confrontations are happening on various battle lines across the country, and our security operatives who are children of people who have their own families and are making the supreme sacrifice and losing their lives, in protecting us. So the point I have made is this: it is presumptuous to say that we have adequate, sufficient security operatives to cover every inch of this country.
Okay.
I have seen protests happen in the city centers. Things are going normal, but then in the suburbs, people are breaking into shops of local folks and then looting, their properties.
All right, Mr.
And we have seen that this has further worsened situation of poverty.
What we saw
in various parts of this country. Nobody is saying that protests should not take place.
As acknowledged by your co-panelist, Barrister Boleigha, is the move away from a street march to convergence at places of symbolic places. In 2012, we saw that convergence in Ojota, next to the popular Gani Fahimi Park, Freedom Park.
Yeah.
And we saw another in Freedom Park, where speakers and civil society leaders and opinion leaders took turn, to make statements. With the EndSARS protest, we saw a convergence around the toll gate, even though that was disrupting traffic. But it was more or less, it became a center point for the convergence until the security agencies mismanaged that protest. And of course, we know what followed. Is it impossible for us to designate places for convergence such that everybody moves peacefully to that place? Speeches are given, the people canvass for whatever they canvass for and disperse from that place. Is that impossible for the security to agree with these leaders and have something like that rather than just shut down the possibility of people given the opportunity to ventilate?
Well, see, when you have protests of this nature, do not forget that in these protests, it's hard to even identify any particular group of persons as being the leaders of this protest to say, look, come to this area. And let us not also forget the fact that protests can be spontaneous. It doesn't have to require a meeting for people to say, we want to gather here. People can even stand in front of their house or very close to their area and protest. Not everybody will have access, depending on where they live, to go to a particular area to converge. But I agree with you. If that can be done to designate specific areas in each state to say, or in every local government to say, look, if you want to protest, this is the area you can protest. It's okay. But the whole essence of protest is to draw government attention to some of the things people are complaining about. And when you designate certain areas and it makes it very inaccessible and it doesn't even draw any particular attention, some of the inconvenience you mentioned with regards to the toll gates, which disrupted a little bit of traffic, one way or the other, it sent a message. People are concerned and people are worried. But if you have a back room, a town hall, or whatever to say, look, go and protest, it may not have that desired effect. But I agree with you that every local government, probably every area, you should have such areas. But that is something that can only just be talked about. The practicality of it is something that I do not see happening.
All right, Mr. Akoji, let me come to you. So, for the longest of periods, the government has expressed its concerns that the protests, of course, because of previous experiences, might be hijacked. However, it's seeming like the government has not realized that Nigerians, for various reasons, have decided to hit the streets because of what some would term the insensitivities, to their problems, as the case might be. Wouldn't it have been a better call for the government, to continue to advocate for peaceful protests in designated areas, rather than disrepute the protest entirely?
Now, you see, I don't know whether you are aware, but very recently, the Inspector General of Police has had engagements with a section of the leaders of this proposed protest, led by a very highly respected lawyers, including the Barr Association, the Nigerian Bar Association. And at that meeting, the Inspector General of Police proposed protests in enclosure. And this was resoundingly rejected, by this group. It's trending on other news platforms, if you guys are not already aware of that.
So,
you cannot shut down people who have legitimate
we definitely know that in that meeting, Mr. Ide Effiong also complained that in 2020, during the NSAS, pictures of so-called hijackers of the protest were put online, and even the spokesperson of the police at that time was tagged to ensure the arrest of those thugs, who took over this protest and hijacked this protest, as the case may be. But till date, no information has been heard with reference to, that. And perhaps that was what championed the rejection, of this call for protesting in enclosed spaces.
But you have had a recurrence of conversation around why don't you allow people to protest in a designated place. So what I was saying is to directly address that. Now, let me share with you a personal experience I had during the #EndSARS. People speak as though #EndSARS protest happened only in Lagos. No, it happened in literally all the states of the Federation, and it manifested in various dimensions. Perhaps why Lagos has become a reference point is because of the extensive damage to public and private properties that we saw happened in Lagos. My personal experience is this. Under the Boleigha Bridge in Abuja, I was driving. Traffic was extremely chaotic because the road was completely blocked by protesters. And then right in front of me, there was this gentleman who was in the car with his son. Now that boy began to suffer an asthmatic crisis, and he didn't have his ventilator with him. So the man came out and was visibly very distressed. And he was saying, look, my son is dying. My son is dying. And then I came out to see what was happening. The boy was gasping for air. And there was no way for him to either reverse or move ahead or rush for any kind of help or assistance. And so I went with him, and we approached some leaders of that protest during that #EndSARS under the Boleigha Bridge. One of them sounded reasonable, came and verified the situation. Then he went back and reported to the others that we must create a path, a road for this man to take his son out of this place because the son is dying, having a serious, severe asthmatic attack. That never happened. Quite a number of the other protesters were saying, no, nobody's going to pass. And the road was completely blocked. I couldn't stand the sight of that thing. We were totally helpless. We pleaded and pleaded. No road was created for this man to take his son out of that place, in that kind of situation. Now, these are unforeseen circumstances that you would find where protests are held in procession across roads.
Mr. Akoji, if I may ask, where were the police
and all of this must be taken into account. The right to protest must be juxtaposed with the right of those who do not want to protest but go about their daily earning. There's a huge population of Nigerians who earn their living and who are able to feed because they go out daily.
What lessons do you think we have learned with how 2020 NSAS protest was managed, and how can we apply those lessons to this current proposition to ensure that it's a win-win situation for everyone?
Get that, please.
Do you need me to come again?
Yes, please.
I was saying, in your closing thoughts, what lessons do you think we have learned from the NSAS protest, and how can we apply that both on the side of the civil society, the protesting public, and the government to ensure that this time we have something that is devoid of violence that affords everybody a win-win situation?
For me, I think it's a very simple thing. Ensure that protesters are given adequate security. Protesters are not out to cause any violence. They are there just to draw government attention to their plight.
Thank you very much. Mr. Akoji, if you are still there, we would like your closing remarks.
Yes, just made by my fellow guest in the studio.
Yes. So I want to acknowledge the fact that, yes, indeed, Nigerians are going through a very hard patch, at this particular point in time. Cost of living has gone through the roof. But government is deploying several measures to mitigate in the short term. And then there are several policies that are also being put in place to bring about solutions in the medium to long term. This is just 1 year into the life of this administration. And we will all acknowledge that the challenges we face today did not come today. They didn't just come off all of a sudden. It's accumulation. Yes, citizens have a right to protest, to ventilate, to say they are not happy about some of the policies that are being put out. But then dialogue is the best way forward. Let the dialogue continue. It is dialogue that will bring about quick solutions. If we protest, and God forbid, protest gets out of hand and creates further damage to private and public properties, it will set us back.
Thank you
so
very
I am
much, Mr.
again reiterating the appeal that there should be continuous dialogue
about the need to eschew violence as we canvass for what is our legitimate right. We've been speaking with Mr. Akoji David, who is the Director of Special Duties at the National Orientation Agency. He currently speaks to us from Bauchi State, and of course, we have joining him in that conversation Mr. Boleigha, who is a public affairs analyst and a former chairman of the Nigerian Barr Association, Yenagoa Branch. Thank you very much, most kindly, for joining this program and sharing very insightful perspective with our viewers this morning. And we wish you, of course, the best of what's left of the day. And that's the much we can bring you on this conversation. It's been a heated debate, for and against the need to have this protest.
I really wished it was possible for Mr. Akoji to answer my question as to whether the police were present, while he experienced that. Hopefully, they would have been able to provide the needed support to clear the traffic.
Of course, but as the barrister said, it will always be, it's always the responsibility of government to ensure that these things do not rear their head during this kind of protest. We will take a quick breather. When we return, it will be the stories that made it to to the headlines of select national newspapers this morning. Please don't go away.